Welcome to the Sounds of Encouragement, the place for creatives to find encouragement and support to help you stay motivated, creative, and inspired to use your craft to more fully impact your community. Thank you for tuning into this episode, and don't forget to subscribe so you get notified of future episodes. If you find value in these podcasts, please share with friends or colleagues. To keep this production ad-free, please share your support at www.buymeacoffee.com/encouragement and share a one-time gift or check out the member levels. I'm your host, Melissa Slocum, and I thrive on encouraging other creatives through teaching music, small business coaching, podcasting, and so much more. Find out more at www.musicgrow.com and subscribe to be part of a growing creative community supporting one another. Don't forget to check out the links in the show notes. And remember, I'm here for you, so you can be there for those who need you the most. Enjoy the show. Award-winning music educator Merlin B. Thompson, who holds a PhD, a Master of Arts, and a Bachelor of Music, is the creator and founder of Teach Music 21C, a music teacher professional development program that highlights 21st century teaching tools and philosophy. Merlin is recognized internationally for his expertise in music studio teaching. His recent projects include working with hundreds of teachers, students, and parents throughout Canada, the United States, China, New Zealand, Australia, and Finland. Merlin is the author of More Than Music Lessons, a studio teacher's guide to parents practicing projects and character. Please welcome my guest, Merlin Thompson. Welcome to Sounds of Encouragement. I am your host, Melissa Slocum, and you just heard a little bit about our guest today, Merlin Thompson. Merlin, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks, Melissa. It's great to join you.
Absolutely. So we met actually last spring at the Music Teachers National Association conference here in Atlanta. And it was such a pleasure because you had reached out to me via email about doing a podcast interview, and the timing just wasn't working out for me, and my apologies for that. But finally, we get to sit down for an interview. But what a pleasure to get to see you in person and talk with you and learn more about your work, great work, and just meet you face to face, and be able to chat briefly at MTNA. So I like to start these interviews by talking a little bit about what encouragement has looked like for you in your life. Have there been some moments that you would like to share, or people that were specifically important along your journey in terms of encouragement?
Yeah, well, I've been teaching for a long time. I'm coming up to 50 years here pretty soon. So
Yay.
you can imagine there have been a number of people throughout that journey that have been really important. And it's, for me, it's really remarkable how some of them came up very quickly in my early years of teaching. And the one that I want to really mention that was a real game changer for me, I just graduated from university. I had my impressions of what teachers should be doing. I'm the artistic director of a Suzuki piano program. The program had a great reputation. And there was also kind of an underlying current that this particular program was going to, at this conservatory, was going to involve a lot of parental involvement. And
Ah,
that was kind of like a mainstay of the program, which
sure.
is different from other programs at that conservatory. And so here was a dad who approached me, and he had a question for me. And his question was, how long will it be before his son is able to practice on his own? I thought, wow, okay, we're going to get right down to the nitty-gritty of things here.
Yeah,
Because what he was asking was, how much are you going to depend on me to get things done? And
right.
I realized that I needed to find language in my teaching so that I wasn't just paying attention to the principles that, the Suzuki method set out for me, but that I was paying attention to what would parents be coming in with and what would they be looking for in a music program for their children. And
Mm.
so I responded, "You'll be surprised how much your son can do on his own at the end of the first lesson." And as soon
Ah,
as I said that, I went, "Okay, Merlin, you just made a commitment to this man here.
yeah.
What are you going to do to make that happen?" And I realized it was all about language. And the language was going to be that I said to his son, "Why don't you show your dad how to do this when you get home? Or why don't you teach
Mm.
your dad how to do this particular thing?" And never to turn to the dad and say, "Make sure you show your son how
Right,
to do this when you get home." And
right.
so it was that moment of just tweaking my curiosity. For me, it was an encouragement as to what am I going to do to help children be independent? What am I going to help parents do to maintain the relationship that they already have with their child? Not change that relationship, just keep the relationship that they got in place. So that for me was a pivotal moment in this at the beginning of my teaching, which of course I spent the next 50 years building on.
Yeah, what a remarkable story because that's a pretty common moment that I feel like happens for a lot of teachers. And I'm not sure that very many teachers would give the answer that you gave. I think a lot of teachers might say, well, it's going to be a few years, right? Especially for young children, before they can be independent. So, what a game changer for you. And then, so, finish the story. What was the feedback that you got then from as they continued?
Yeah, so that was the deal. That was what we were looking for. And it was a real game changer for me in terms of paying attention to the language that I was using, because I'd seen teachers use the language that you just use. It's going to be a while before this can happen. And
Right.
then, in retrospect, I'm looking back and I'm thinking, it's kind of like a first date. On a
Yeah.
first date, you wanna make a really good impression. You wanna
Yeah.
make an impression that you're open, that you're
Yeah.
receptive, that you're flexible, that you're interesting, that you're curious, that you can bend to meet the needs of the relationship, and
Right.
if that first date goes really, really well, then you get a second date and a third date.
Hmm.
If the first date, that first conversation doesn't go well, yeah, you may not get very far.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we know too from the research that anytime a student becomes the teacher, it embeds the learning that much more. So not only was that so brilliant of you for being able to use that language with a parent, but then also to be able to educationally cement that learning for the child right away.
Yeah, and it's just really a matter of ownership. Uh,
Hmm.
and the thing about being a teacher is that the journey actually doesn't belong to us.
Mm.
The journey belongs to our students. And
Yes.
it's a really interesting role that we play because on occasion we do need to lead the way. But if all we're doing is leading all the time, yeah, you can see students may not want to buy into that after a certain point. So
Right.
we're leading, but we're also following the students' lead. And I like to think there are occasions when we need to get out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Thank you. Were there any other moments or people of encouragement that, were maybe a pivot point for you that kind of changed other parts of your trajectory?
Yeah, I'll talk about the next conversation with the dad that I had, which occurred fairly shortly thereafter too. And here was a father. He was the youngest of his own family's group of siblings.
Mm,
So he had older brothers and sisters whose kids were already at finishing high school and so on.
sure.
His kids were 5 and 7. He came to me and he said, "Merlin, my sister's children, they're now at 17 and 18. They all took piano lessons for 10 years. After their final piano lesson, they never touched the instrument again."
Oh,
And he looked at me and he said, "Merlin, I don't want that for my children.
yeah.
I want something that's going to sustain them for whatever, for their entire life. I don't want just to
Right.
say this is something we're going to do when they're kids and that's it."
Yeah.
And so I looked at him and I went, Okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying because I was very well aware that for most teachers, that's pretty much been our legacy, that students take lessons and a very small percentage of them actually do things like make recreational music making part of their lifestyle as adults. So
Right.
here I was, pivotal conversation. What am I going to do? And I'm glad I've had, these 50 years of teaching because in the 10 years that I spent with them, I was able to do certain things that did get this transition to happen. And I
Okay.
was successful with the son in terms of helping those two kids. But for me, what was the learning was that in order to find out if things are working, I need a 10-year period in order to do that. So it wasn't just about what am I going to do, but how long is it going to take to test this out before I understand if this is working or not? And there were lots of things that I did. No, it didn't work. They were very
Sure.
exciting and they were interesting to do, but they didn't have that long-term impact.
Okay. So, when you talk about strategies to keep people playing for the rest of their life, I know in my studio, I like to help people be functional musicians where they don't just have to rely on sheet music, but where they can improvise or they can compose very simple things if they like to, or where they can hear a tune and maybe by ear be able to replicate it, on their instrument. And there are lots of things that I encourage my students to do, whether they want to play recreationally by themselves or if they want to be part of a band and play keys, in a band. But are those some things that you also have done, or are there other things that you encourage?
Yeah, so those are all part of my toolkit. The one thing that I came up with in the last couple of years is what I call the chill out concert.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
okay, so you can see a chill out concert has students have a relationship with their chill out pieces. So it's not a concert of chill out music. It's a concert of pieces that students have identified as their own chill out piece. And you can imagine when I first came up with this idea, I thought, do they even have chill out pieces? Do they even go to the piano and just play for their own
Yeah.
if it's enjoyment or distraction
Yeah.
or curiosity or whatever, do they do that?
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of a kind of an introduction of the whole idea to find out, are students just going to the piano to get ready for their next lesson or for the
Right.
next deadline or for the next concert? So that
Right.
was the first thing to find out. So I've been having this chill out concert now for well for this year was the first time I ever did it, but it was really interesting what happened in the process because the chill out language then became embedded in the structure of my teaching.
Oh.
Sure, we have the things that you just mentioned. Are you
Hmm.
doing improv? Are you doing reading? Are you playing? Are things off YouTube? Are you doing things by ear? Are you doing some repertoire? Which was your chill out piece this week?
Mm.
Why was it your chill out piece? And then having the chill out concert, I do it online, so everybody is in their chill out
Yeah.
environment. I do it online, and everybody explains what this piece means to them. And it can be and it's so interesting because for a concert that I've organized, I'm looking for the best piece that's been played for the
Right.
longest period of time that's gonna demonstrate all of these musical capacities.
Right.
The chill out concert, no, students are doing, I'm playing my hardest piece. The next one's playing, I'm playing my easiest piece.
Hmm.
I'm playing the piece I played for the longest. The next one is playing, I'm playing the piece I just started last week.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I love that because also, that ties into a lot of what music educators are tuning in now too, and that's an intentional pun, tuning in to social emotional learning.
Right.
And I often ask my students, like, what's your piece that you play when you're really excited? What's the piece you play when you're angry? What's the piece that you play when you're sad? What's the piece that you play when you're just feeling calm and content? And there are like, it's interesting to hear the pieces that they come up with it and that they want to share when they're angry or when they're content or when they're excited. So that's what a brilliant concept to build a whole concert around that.
Yeah, and then what I'm really trying to do is just sow the seeds. So, what is the activity that I'm hoping they will do as an adult? Well, I'm hoping that they'll come home from work and
Yes.
fill out with the instrument for 10 minutes before they make supper.
Yeah.
Or, kids are growing up and they'll have their own chill out, whatever experience on the weekend. So just to sow that seed now and to get practice at it, that
Yeah.
we're going to invest in that. For me, there is this huge wellness and
Hmm.
well-being component to why we have music in our lives. And that can be just from a listening point of view, but
Right.
from a music making point of view, yeah, it gets pretty magnificent pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And like anything else, sowing that seed, sooner it's for me, sowing the seed, the sooner the better is
Yeah.
the case.
Yeah. What a great thread of conversation. And I wish I could stay here for another hour just to talk about that because there's so many great aspects to this. But thank you for sharing those very pivotal, important conversations and encouragements in your career because the teachers who are watching and listening, if they're not tuned into social emotional learning and if they're not doing some of these things, what a great opportunity, what great ideas to experiment with in your own studio. So thank you for sharing those.
Yeah. Yep, so these are things that anybody can do. You don't need
Right.
special training to get a chill out piece going.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So I know sometimes we receive encouragement that turns out really to be someone else's expectations for us. How have you in your career gone about navigating the difference between someone's expectation versus their actual encouragement for you?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. And it's something that Melissa, you're really good at getting questions that I have been thinking of for a long time.
Oh, good.
So this is a question that came to me probably in the early 1990s.
Okay.
At that point, I'd been teaching for a while. I was aware of how I taught. I was somewhat aware that I was teaching in the style of my own teachers. I used a lot of the same expressions and the same gestures. And in a sense, just to tie into the two words that you're using, expectation and encouragement, there was a kind of expectation that I would continue to teach in that style.
Sure.
And then there was this other thing that was going on with me, which was prompted by that conversation with the parent asking about his son's independence.
Right.
And that conversation, many years before that. So I had this notion of student ownership and student independence as something that I wanted to pay attention to. And then this other word kept coming up, which was authenticity.
Mm,
The notion that I was teaching, creating this environment where students could explore their own authentic self for me became really important. And at a certain moment, I looked at my own teaching and I went, hmm, but am I teaching as the teacher that people expect me to be?
right.
Or am I teaching as the teacher that I really am? So it
Wow.
was this whole notion of authenticity. And just simple things. I had always told the same stories that my teacher had told. So I was
Ah,
very familiar with the stories that my teachers told. And one day I went, that's a very good story, but what are my stories? And what would happen if I started telling my stories? And of course, what happens when you start telling your own stories is that people start to know who you are.
right.
And so this notion of, yeah, expectation and encouragement. So I was in that environment watching wanting to encourage my students to be authentic. At the same time, I needed to look to myself and say, what can I do to encourage my own self to be authentic as well?
Right. So, what a switch for the brain and the emotions, I think, to be able to make and a leap of faith in a way to say, I'm not going to do what my predecessor did or predecessors did. I'm going to venture out and experiment with this and be vulnerable and be authentic and be myself. And I do think that that is very hard for a lot of teachers to do, especially because we do teach young people to be professional, right?
Mhm.
And to have a professional persona. And but there's a fine line, right, between being professional and being vulnerable and true to yourself and authentic and sharing parts of you with your studio. And can you share, how do you walk that line now? I'm sure you're well used to it like I am, but I think at first that's a scary thing. So how have you gone about doing that?
Yeah, and that's another thing that I put a lot of time thinking into. It's interesting how you keep coming to these things that I've been putting a lot of thought into. Um, and you're right about this, that we have this perfectionist side of everything.
Yeah.
And education and learning to play a musical instrument can be a very structured process. We learn this piece first. We learn
Right.
this technique first. We learn when you can do that technique perfect, then I'll allow you to go on to the next technique. And so there's a certain amount of logic to all that. That we buy into, as I won't say buy into, that we take advantage of as
Right.
teachers, because we love linear processes and it's nice to know where we're going and how we're going to get there.
Right.
But there is another side. So I've got on one side what I call structured excellence. It's a structure that we use to achieve excellence. On the other side, I want to make sure that I've got something else that I call interruptive messiness. And it's
Oh,
the notion
perfect. Oh,
that practicing includes these risk-taking moments. It includes things that are complete failures like you could never imagine. But at
right.
the same time, those moments of interruptive messiness are alive with potentials and things that we wouldn't get if we only stayed over here in the structured excellence side of things. And it reminds me of an article that I read also early in my teaching. This would be about 1990. So midway through 1990s. Paul Poulet, if you know the name Paul Poulet from the American Piano Quartet,
Okay.
a professor of music at the university at BYU University.
Right.
He's writing an article in the American Music Teacher magazine. I'm reading the article, and he's describing his practicing as a mixture of noodling, oodling, maybe he said fooling around, but it included sight reading, scales, repertoire, and then his mom yelling from the kitchen, "I don't think that's what you're supposed to be practicing." And so it's the prime, a really wonderful example of structure for sure, but he
Hmm.
got this other stuff that's just coming up out of the middle of nowhere. And those two things are what are his anchors and inspirations both. So your question was, how do teachers get comfortable with this duality? Well, yeah, we step outside of our comfort zone, but just a tiny, tiny bit, to maybe say to the student, why don't you play that with different dynamics at this time?
Mm, right.
So now we're not going to go to opposite dynamics, which is where I usually go to. We're just going to get, can you play it with different dynamics? Or I might say, this is a fire engine piece. Can you play it as a lullaby? So just
Ah,
go to a different place with
sure.
music and try it, just to let your mind take you to some place. And I've had so much fun. It's fun to see what happens when you say to a student, focus, focus, focus. They play the piece that's got focus. And you say, can you do the second time with focus? But the second time they're worn out.
Sure.
So they make it to the end of the first page and they're done. And so you say, oh, just let go. Just
Yeah.
let go of everything. And so they let go and suddenly everything is there again. And then they try to play it twice with letting go. And no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Such wonderful advice. The other thing too that I wanted to share that I've found in my studio, I'm just learning audiation and music moves for piano by Marilyn Lowe. And so what I have found, particularly with my youngest students, is because I'm new to the material as well, even like I've worked with it for a couple of years, but not at all like some of the experts in audiation work. And so a lot of times there are songs that are new to me, and I'll be working with students and I'll say, I don't know the song very well yet, so let's learn it together. And it's okay if we both make mistakes. So let's try it and see what happens. And then it's sort of like, oh, well, now she's not like she's the teacher, but it's okay for her to make mistakes too. And
Yeah.
we're learning this together. We're in this together. And that's made a wonderful, more playful sense of interaction in my studio.
Nice. And I'll just add to that, articulating that process. So talking about what's going
Mhm.
on and validating that, oh, this is the one where we're just going to try and see what happens. And there's great value in that. And there's also this one over here where we're going to aim for the best we can possibly do.
Right.
So giving those two situations, verbal validation, for me, that's the really important place too.
Yeah. I love that you're so focused on language and you're so intentional about language, because I feel like that has also been an important thing in my studio with my clients, because I do monthly newsletters to my clients, to the parents.
Yeah.
And very often I am very intentional about the language that I'm using so that I'm calling something forward that I either want to see, or I'm encouraging something that I may have told a student, but I want everyone to be aware of. So like, going back to that idea of noodling around on the piano, I know parents, they're like, well, I'm paying for lessons, not noodling.
Yeah.
But I often have said in my newsletters to parents, noodling and exploring is one of the best things your child can do at their instrument,
Mhm.
because they are hearing, they're listening, they're experimenting, they're changing things, they're actually like working things out, even though you may not think that.
Yeah.
It's one of the more productive periods for me personally as a teacher at an instrument. So I'm glad that you are talking about intentionality and language, because I think that's not where we get very good instruction
Mm.
in music school, is how to communicate with clients in a
Yeah.
professional way, but also in a way that helps us breed that culture in our studios
Mm.
of transparency, of vulnerability, of acceptance, and all the things that we want to build in terms of culture. So, um, I'm not sure that that is a skill that everyone has, but it seems like you and I probably have a natural affinity for that.
Yeah, I think you're really right about this. It's an important skill. The thing is to get practice doing it is what it is.
Yeah.
So I have the feeling, and I always go back to this first date scenario,
Mm,
you know, and sometimes on occasion I'll say to teachers, imagine yourself on the first date. And how much creativity and imagination do you have to give that person on the other side of the table the impression that you're the person that they want to spend time with? So you
yeah.
may be saying things to that person you've never said to anyone else before. But why are you doing it? Because you want to connect with them, you want to communicate. And it's by stepping across those, what I could say, boundaries,
Yeah.
become skillful then. And it's even like I said, I did a workshop on the weekend and there were parents there, students were there. And the thing that I kept coming back to was structured excellence and interruptive messages. And I just pointed out for them a solid diet of structured excellence, you'll just wear people out.
Yeah.
A solid diet of just interruptive messiness, no, we're gonna be out of that. So it's
Yeah.
not about one or the other. It's about,
Hmm.
well, actually, we can have structured excellence for a while, and then I just need to throw things up in the air and see what happens.
Yeah.
But I'm only gonna do that 2 or 3 times, because actually something shows up in that
Hmm.
throwing things around, then I now go, "Oh, well, maybe if I work on it for a bit over
Right.
here on the structured excellence side." So they have a really wonderful relationship with each other. And I think for for teachers in general, to have a better sense of that interplay between structure and freedom would be it would be a really great teaching tool for everybody to have.
I agree. I agree. And I'm so glad that you're sharing that, because, boy, if you are listening or watching, you're getting sort of a masterclass here with Merlin Thompson. And if you're looking for some of his resources, I hope that you'll check out and follow his, his socials, and take a look at what he has to offer, because we're just scratching the surface here of all the wonderful material and all the wonderful wisdom and knowledge that he has to share with teachers. So I encourage you to check that out. So I want to step back for just a moment and think about 2020 and global pandemic. This was a time that the whole world shared, times of lockdowns, and theaters were closed, music venues were closed, teaching studios, many were closed and had to pivot and figure out a way to make a living as teachers. A lot of things changed. And it was, for some people, a fearful time, for some people, a time filled with grief. And for some people, it was a very rich, productive, creative time. What was that time like for you? And what kept you positive and hopeful and moving forward during a pretty big crisis around the globe?
Yeah, it was so I'll just let you know, I started teaching online in 2002.
Yeah.
So 2002 is 18 years before the
Yeah.
pandemic showed up.
Yeah.
And I started teaching online. I was teaching in a conservatory at the time. The government of Alberta was very forward thinking at that time. They wanted institutions to have really top rate capacity for communicating using what we were calling video conferencing technology.
Right. Right.
So I started teaching. I did a demonstration in 2002, which prompted then a whole bunch of things happening. I had students who were out of town. I think in 2004, I started teaching Skype lessons.
Sure.
If you can imagine, you're like,
Yep.
really? We were doing Skype lessons? And to talk about, you think the delay in 2020 was harsh? In 2004, yeah, you wondered, am I ever going to hear what they're doing? So
Yeah.
anyway, so the pandemic showed up. I remember I got an email. The mom said, sorry, we're going to respect social distancing. We won't be showing up this week. We don't know how long it's going to last. I said, here's my Skype address. I'll see you at your regular time. And we jumped in right there.
Yeah.
What was my big anchor though for getting through those turbulent years was something that I didn't anticipate. And because what I did was I realized I wasn't going to see my colleagues for a
Yeah.
while. And so I contacted four teachers, a teacher here in Calgary, a teacher in Montreal, two teachers in Utah who I'd known for probably the better part of 15 years. And we had really enjoyed getting together at conferences once a year for our usual get together conference.
Right.
So pandemic showed up. I sent them all an email. Would you like to meet on Skype this afternoon or with Wednesday morning at 11:30?
Yeah.
And so we have met now every week
Mm.
since 2020, since July of 2020.
Wow.
And those conversations were really the place where we all could share what was going on, the
Yeah.
trials, the difficulties that we were facing, and at a certain point, knowing that other people were facing the same difficulties kind of just made us step back and go, "Oh, well, that's not a difficulty. That's just something that's inherent with this situation."
Yeah.
Also, what came from it was my kind of analytic mind went, I think you should start organizing things.
Mhm.
And so it was just really, you talk about things happening all at the same time. I got an invitation from a music education publisher to write a book. And so I had lots of things that I had written before I started pulling them together. And then I'd share them with my group online
Sure.
and I get some feedback. And so it was a really productive time for all of us. And I really am highly indebted to this group that they gave me feedback on things that eventually became this book, More Than Music Lessons, which was published during the pandemic.
Wow. Wow. What an invaluable group. And not just obviously during the pandemic, but going forward now too.
Yeah.
I just read in a Facebook group a teacher who was asking, what can I do to prevent burnout? And my first thought was community
Yeah.
and being part of even a small group of two or three other teachers where you have that time and you have that space. Because I know for me personally, I have people that I speak with either daily or weekly who, we're all in the trenches together. We live in all parts of the country, but we check in regularly with one another. And that is probably for me the single biggest thing that prevents me from burning out.
Yeah.
And I think that the again, we know from the research that has been done over several years, several surveys, that having independent studios and teachers who run independent studios is very isolating.
Absolutely.
And then you layer on the pandemic, and I think people got even more isolated.
Yeah.
So, this idea of being able to use technology to connect, while it may be hard for some people, I think what a wise thing to be able to do, and what a beautiful thing to be able to do to stay connected. So, thank you for that encouragement and reminder to connect with our peers, whether it's in person or virtual, because I think that that is actually a must in our careers.
Yeah, and you said with the isolation that independent studio teachers face, we don't see anybody but our students and their parents.
Yeah,
And we go home to partners for sure, but partners don't always want to hear about your day.
exactly.
They
Exactly.
want to hear about other things that you are going on in your life too. So yeah, for sure. And and the strength of that experience for us has is why we continue to do it. So it wasn't something we just did during the pandemic, and when the
Right.
pandemic finished, we said, okay, we're back to normal. No, we
Yeah.
realized the value was there. We've kept on doing it ever since.
Yeah. Same. Oh, thank you for sharing that. So I know that there are so many things that you could share, but that's why I want people to go to your socials and buy your book and go to your website. But are there some encouragements that you have for teachers who might be struggling right now for a variety of reasons? But encouragement that you would share just to, again, offer some people something from your experience, something that you've learned, something that you want to put out there to encourage other people who just might be having a hard time right now.
Yeah. And this is such an important part to just be able to recognize what's going on. I can be really honest about my trajectory as a teacher. And I'm the kid who cried when other kids started crying at school. That's the kid.
Oh, yeah.
I never cried really for my own whatever. Nothing was really going on for me. But if somebody else was crying, then I was the kid that started crying. So there's a certain vulnerability that I've carried throughout my entire life, which in certain ways is a part of my authentic self. I
Mm,
never want to give up my vulnerability. But then at the same time, I recognize in the first 20 years of my teaching that I had a tendency to do things that were not so positive for myself. And
mm,
I had the good fortune of teaching in lots of different places. People would always say, "Oh, it was so great, it was so successful." And my typical reaction was when I got home to go through the whole experience and to cross off all the things that I thought I could have done better. And so I ended up coming away from all these successful experiences with what I termed as a deficit.
yeah,
And it was a self-analyzed deficit each time.
sure.
And I've had this pattern for about 25 years. And one day I was telling a friend about a workshop that I taught on the weekend and, going through my list of here's all the things that I did wrong. She looked at me and just said, Roland, do you see what you're doing here? I said, oh, and it was like, oh my goodness. I'm digging my own grave after
Yeah.
every single act of these activities. And so I realized, um, this is something that I've taken on for myself.
Hmm.
So how long did it take me then to get to a better place? Well, that's actually interesting because it took about 5 years,
Mm,
because the habit of, um, being my worst self-critic was so well ingrained. All I could do at first was just to be aware that I
sure.
have this negative tendency for over critiquing myself. So just be aware of it, See if you can just be aware of it. You don't have to do anything about it. And then there was the moment when I just said, okay, now I'm totally aware of it. I'm just going to stop doing that. And it was just like that. I just stopped doing it. So, what I would say to people who are in that burnout kind of feeling right now, it is not to try to get to the 100% not burnout place.
Yeah.
Just become aware of what's going on. Become your own nurturer, become your own advocate. Understand that your desire to do things well is a good thing. Uh,
Hmm.
Too much of that is like my structure and my messiness, but too much of that can have this kind of burnout takeaway for people. So it's, yeah, first thing is awareness and acceptance. And when the moment's right, you'll find the steps to take you to a better place.
Yeah, it's that's a hard one because it's such an effective way to operate and to be able to think, to be self-critical when we're practicing and performing and
Yeah.
preparing for performance. That's an essential skill. But when it comes to our personal lives and our professional, endeavors, even in just, teaching a lesson, if we're so self-critical, yeah, that can put us into a bad spiral
Yeah.
and actually make our teaching worse, because we're so focused on what we're doing, not focused on the human being that we're with in the moment. So I appreciate you sharing that. That is a difficult hurdle. I can see for some people to be able to overcome. And I'm glad that you brought that. I never would have guessed that that was part of your journey and that was part of your story, because you do seem very optimistic, very positive, about yourself and everything that you do. And so that makes sense maybe a little bit more now to me, because knowing that history, I can see why that is something you are very intentional about, and what a great thing to encourage other teachers to be able to do, because that's a hard one.
Yeah. So protect your vulnerability. Don't give it up.
Yeah.
It's so the whole thing of don't give up your vulnerability. Your vulnerability is something you want to hang on to. Uh, so it's not just about becoming the strong person who can get through any situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, not quite.
Yeah. Yeah. And, if that's not something, if that's a skill you need help developing, certainly there are counseling relationships or friendships that can help you with that too. So, like, you had a friend who was able to point that out for you and go, did you know? Have you noticed?
So again, that community is really important.
Yeah.
Having
Very.
those people who get to know you over a period of time, and every once in a while they can give you the advice that's probably somewhere in the back of your own head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. All right. We want to take a moment to reflect on some of the music that you have chosen to share as your top 5 songs of encouragement. So I'm going to share screen and we're going to go to the first selection that you wanted to share today. I love this. I mean, uh, the whole musical is incredible. So this is from South Pacific. This is just 10 seconds of Bali High. If you have not seen South Pacific, please go find it. Please go watch it. Please go see it. But here's a 10-second clip of this incredible production. Here we go.
Bali high may call you any night, any day in your heart.
Oh, I hate to stop these, but talk a little bit about this musical and this song, please.
So I grew up in the 1950s and 60s on a small farm in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
And my mother and dad were both music lovers. When my dad sang, my mom played a little bit and sang as well.
Mm.
And my mom got a membership to Record of the Month Club.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Every month in the mail arrived a record.
Yep.
And to think, well, we have Amazon now doing all that kind of stuff. So, but
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, there it was, Record of the Month. And one of the records that my mom ordered was the music for South Pacific.
Mm.
And so this was music that played in our home casually all the time. And as a child, I never really understood what influence it was having on me. Because, of course, we didn't go to the movie. Going to the movies was a major undertaking.
Yeah.
On a farm in Saskatchewan in the 1950s and 60s. And
Yeah.
you didn't take your kids to the movies. You might
Yeah.
send them to a Disney movie, but you didn't send them to South Pacific.
Yeah.
So years later, when South Pacific was on television and it came on, and I went, oh, this sounds very familiar. I wonder why that is. And it took me a little while, but eventually I got it. Oh, Mom and Dad, Record of the Month Club. And the whole notion that music was just something that was just so much part of our everyday life.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really aware that that was anything special, because it was just integrated in everyday life. So it's like hats off to my mom and dad
Yeah.
for Record of the Month Club, because the only alternative would have been listening to the radio.
Yeah. What a beautiful way to be immersed in music in your home. I grew up in the 70s and we still had Record of the Month Club, and my parents were doing Record of the Month and the Weekly Reader, little kids magazine. So that's, and then the Golden Books were still around too. So we had we would get books every month, and we had a Record of the Month, and I was the special one that got the Weekly Reader. Those were different times, but what a great way for organizations to get music and publications out to young families. And times have changed, but what a great way to be immersed in music at a young age. Wow. So this next piece that we're going to listen to is probably familiar to a lot of people. This is Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring. And we're just going to hear the opening 10 seconds. Here we go. Oh, and you all know this one, I'm sure. So go check out that whole album in the show notes. And, it's, even if it's familiar, go listen to it again. What a great time of year to be listening to this music. So share a little bit about that one for us.
So this is the piece that I learned first to play when I was a teenager. I learned a version for organ, and then I learned a version for piano. The version for piano was arranged by, I think, Dame what's her name? Hess is the last name.
Oh.
And last weekend, I attended a performance of Bach by the Calvary Bach Choir, and this was one of the.
Oh.
And the reason I bring it is because it has this, for me, notion of community. And Bach really stands out in my mind as somebody who, during his life as a composer, he filled in many roles. So he was a father, he was a teacher, he was a church organist.
Yep.
So he built community on many different layers, many different levels.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that this piece for me is really a great representation. It can be a piece that just belongs to you. It can be a piece that you recognize brings a whole community of perhaps orchestra musicians and choir members together. So that idea of this intertwining and the different layers that we occupy in life as well. So I am a teacher, but I'm also a partner, and I'm also part of a community. So all of those things are entwined in my identity and in our identities, each one of us.
And I think especially for a piece like that you can hear at all different stages of your life. And I think this is true of all music, but there's something about maybe a piece like that is a little bit more simple in the melodic line that can resonate and mean something different at each stage of life. And like you talked about, we all are multifaceted, and we all have multiple roles within the one being that we are. These pieces are also multifaceted, and they grow with us, and they have different meaning that they bring to our lives at different times. And this is, I think, a beautiful example of exactly that. Yeah. The next piece that you wanted to share, I had not heard this cover version before, but this is Josh Groban's Thankful. And the cover is done by the Rise Up Children's Choir. And so we're just going to pick this up and I'll let you talk about it. We're just going to hear at about the 3-minute mark. If you can hear the words, these words are really incredible for this portion of the lyric. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Talk about that one for a minute, please.
So at the end of the pandemic, so this would be 2022.
Yeah.
I write every New Year's. I write a New Year's letter to the parents of my students.
Okay.
As we were coming then to a shift in where the pandemic was, we were looking at, the light is shining. We can see the end. I thought it would be wonderful to make the next months, and it turned out into a year-long project. And I called it the Gratitude Project.
Oh.
Which meant that every week students were checking in with me and I was asking them, what are you grateful for this week? And as you might see, first weeks, people are saying just ordinary, everyday, regular things. But after a while, I started saying, I think we need to up our game a little bit and talk about things that are deeper, that are more meaningful, not just, I had chocolate sundaes at dessert on Sunday. And so it was a really interesting project to do for the whole year, this idea of the Gratitude Project. And it turned into then a project that I did for the Canadian Federation Music Teachers Association to create a presentation which is called Gratitude in the Shadow of the Global Pandemic.
Wow.
It's available on my website. It's about an hour, but I wanted music to feature in this presentation. I didn't want to just be me talking about gratitude for an hour.
Right.
And so doing my search on Google, I came across this song, first by the Josh Groban rendition, and then there was this cover by this young group of singers from Salt Lake City. And I was touched by both of them, but I thought, I'm gonna let this one, I'm gonna showcase this one in my talk. And so that was the whole year. And very interesting to keep gratitude so close to the surface of what's going on in lessons. It changed the conversations that we had. I can tell you that much.
Well, and I was just going to ask that question. I'm curious to know, how did that change the conversations, the attitudes, the culture, the environment with your students and in your studio? What were some outcomes of that?
Yeah, so at the beginning of January, people were really fed up with the pandemic. We were just annoyed. It's like, and the notion of being thankful for something was almost like, really? Now you're going to ask? But yes, I am going to ask you to be thankful for something. And so what I found as the year progressed, things that showed up were things like, one of my students came and I said, so what's on your gratitude this list this week? And she said, I'm really grateful that I got to teach my cousin how to play the opening phrase of Fur-Elise last week.
Okay.
I thought, would we have ever had that conversation otherwise? Maybe we would have. If I'd said, what did you do interesting on the weekend? She might have told me. But but in the context of being grateful for that, as opposed to just that was an activity, is a different process entirely. And so I think there's something about the gratitude process that sheds light on the way we live. We don't change how we live necessarily. It might be the same experience, but suddenly we've imbued situations with meaning that might otherwise go unnoticed.
True. And I think I think it does change how we live, because I think we look for things to be grateful for. And we look for opportunities to share that gratitude when we're focused on that. What a beautiful project, and what a great encouragement for other teachers who might be listening and watching this interview, because again, we all have different struggles and we all have big feelings sometimes that we need to process. And oftentimes gratitude gets us out of this part of the brain where we're so focused on self, and it helps us step back and see things a little differently from a little different perspective. And even if you just initiate or reinitiate a gratitude practice for yourself, that might be a powerful thing for you and for your students. But I can only imagine what an incredible year that was for your studio and just the overall vibe in the studio. It must have were people like flocking, like, what are you doing? Because we want to be part of it.
Yeah, and it changed. So I finished the day and I feel really good. I love teaching and I love
Yeah.
the opportunity to connect. But including that gratitude thread so consistently, then I realized, oh, there is, if I take the whole bundle of gratitude from that day, wow, this is a pretty wonderful life we've got going on here.
What a beautiful way to live. What a beautiful way to live and work. Oh, gosh. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to move on to the next selection. This is not a version I had ever heard before. So I am so excited that we are sharing this today. This is from the Four Seasons by Vivaldi, but this is an absolutely different and brilliant instrumentation. You can see the accordion here. And so we're just going to listen to a 10-second clip and I'll let you talk about it on the other side. Here we go. Oh my gosh, go listen to this whole thing. I swear to you, it is brilliant. And if you've never heard that before, please go listen to the whole thing. Click the show notes and click the link and just go listen. You will be delighted. Talk about that one for us.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So this, the Vivaldi Four Seasons, is my partner's favorite all-time classical piece.
Ah, okay.
Why the accordion in this case? Well, we holidayed in Berlin a number of years ago.
Ah,
Every day we took the subway or the metro or to somewhere, and we had to go through a certain station. And at the entrance to this station were two musicians who were playing this excerpt from the Vivaldi Four Seasons
wow.
every day that we passed by. And it was just a really great example for me of, you think Berlin, all these, they have three opera companies. They have
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Berlin Philharmonic, they have all
Yeah.
these amazing things. And then there were these two musicians at the entrance to the subway who were playing Vivaldi Four Seasons every day. And
Yeah.
every day it had the same impact on us. It was like the weather was overcast. Oh, well, not anymore. It's a beautiful day. We've just heard these guys who had this incredible technique and had the seasons were bursting with energy and joy. It was just a wonderful way to start the day. And and I want to, recognize my partner too, because they're to recognize that he has brought certain things to my life that I would never have discovered on my own. And
Yeah.
some of those are attitudes. So I remember when we first met and we would come out of the house and he'd look up and he'd say, "Oh, what a beautiful day it is." And I go, "It's a beautiful, I never even noticed."
Right.
He did it for about, I mean, he does it all the time. He still does it.
Yeah.
But in about a month, I caught on. Oh, I should really start paying attention to how beautiful the world is.
Yeah. Yeah. What a wonderful piece to share. It is really delightful. So if you haven't heard that version of it, I promise you, you will walk away a better person for having listened to that. So please go listen. We want to share one more selection, and this is a hard left turn. This is not classical by any stretch, but this equally delightful song is called My Neighbor Totoro, and we're picking it up here at about the last chorus, just a 10-second clip, and then I'll let you talk about it. This is so fun. My goodness, go click on that link and listen to the whole song. You're going to be dancing, get up out of your chair and just dance and enjoy. Talk about this one.
So spending time with my neighbor Totoro, yeah, the line says it, "Come with him and you'll have a really great time."
Yeah.
So this is a real shout out to my students. I don't know this piece. I didn't know this piece until very recently. It came in as a chill out piece that a couple of my students wanted to learn.
Oh, fabulous.
I'm now very familiar with My Neighbor Totoro. And why I shout out to my students? Well, I will say, I mentioned parents as a huge influence, my colleagues, teachers. My students have also influenced my teaching a lot. And I want to share one story from my student Amanda. Uh,
Mm.
this is probably 25 years ago, at the very least. She was 9 years old at the time. She'd been my student since she was 4, so half of her life she had
Mm.
coming to lessons with me. She played a piece that day. It was particularly bad. I couldn't believe how many things were wrong with it. And given that she'd been my student for a number of years, and I'd asked her all kinds of questions, I thought, maybe I won't ask the same question this time. Maybe I'll ask a different question. So I asked her, Amanda, why do you think it is that students sometimes play well and sometimes they don't? And I thought she would say, oh, Mr. Thompson, it's because they're not paying attention to the beat, or they're not playing the right notes, or they're speeding up and slowing down, or they're not doing the right dynamics. But she didn't say that at all. She looked at me, she kind of scowled, and she did the, like a 9-year-old would do. And then she said, the students who play well want to, and the students who don't play well don't care.
Wow.
And I went, oh, okay. Well, would you mind playing it with care this time then? And it was like, oh, really? What? This guy, he just never stops asking me things to do. But she played the piece and she played with Karen and sounded just fine. And it was a real lesson for me to step away from all the things that I think people need to pay attention to in order to play well, like keeping the beat or playing the right notes or playing the
Yeah.
right speed. And to go to this place of care
Yeah.
was something that I knew caring was important in life. And it's odd that until that moment, I never realized how important it was for people playing as well.
Mm. What a wonderful affirmation for the idea of going beyond just the technical
Yeah.
in music and being able to put the emotional and the musicality, the storytelling, the care into it. Um, it's funny that you mentioned that because I just this last weekend had an experience with a student at a competition. And I know in my local competitions, my students don't come out winners because we don't select the hardest repertoire. We are not trying to go for first place and prizes. My students are going to just get comments and feedback and just to improve and do their best.
Yeah.
And I had a student who played, and we talked about playing musically and what that meant for her and the story that she was going to tell with her pieces. And so she went and played, and I saw the list of other students in the other repertoire, and I was like, yep, she's playing some of the easier, not the easiest, but some of the easier repertoire. And so I, wasn't really anticipating anything. And at the end of the day, all the ratings come in, and she placed second in her grade level.
Nice.
Because the judge recognized that playing musically and with care
Mm-hmm.
was better than playing very difficult repertoire without that sense of musicality and care.
Yeah.
And I was delighted for my student to finally have a judge who understood that and who rewarded that. And for her as a young person to see, it's not just about playing the most difficult pieces, right? It's about playing with heart. It's about playing and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. We talk about us as teachers being vulnerable, but I also talk about my students being vulnerable too, sometimes when they perform and being willing to share their own emotions and put their own emotions into it. And what a wonderful reminder from your student and my student's experience that playing with care, playing with that idea of I really care about what I'm doing.
Right.
And I really care about my audience makes a world of difference. So thank you for sharing that.
The thing, there's one more layer of takeaway that I have, and that is that music relies on us to take care of it. So music can't take care. Music isn't something that can take care of itself. And so caring for something that can't care for itself, my impression is it's our preparation for caring for the world around us, for caring for people around us, for caring for the environment, for caring for all those things that are beyond those people's the environment can't control, what it does, but we can control how much we care about things. And to get good at caring for things that don't necessarily give us a big pat on the back, but that
Yeah.
we just do because it's good to care for people, and it's good to care for music, and it's good to care for the environment. It's good to do those things, and getting that practice in as a music maker, yeah, I think it's a pretty marvelous thing.
And it makes me curious now to ask another question, which is, do you think that moving forward, we will have to really promote and encourage even more of that in the music world in order for um, our in order for what we do to have the impact that we want it to have?
Yeah, yeah, I come back to the to two things: well-being and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And that caring for music, caring for what we do as music makers is how we invest in ourselves, in our own wellness and our own well-being. It's also how we invest in the wellness and the well-being of the communities that we live in as well. And I know we come from a long history of music teaching being focused on performance and preparing future musicians and so on. And we've got the results. We have those excellent results there. There's been a couple of intermediate conversations which have come about and said, "Oh, we're going to have music lessons for brain development and cognitive things, and those kinds of things." And then there was, I think you've mentioned the emotional learning, and I'll take that emotional learning just to a little bit more personal place, because the language of emotional learning, I don't know, people, yeah, people get what that is, but what does it actually mean? So I like to promote music making for its value in terms of authenticity, in terms of validating who we are. But then also for me, there is this investment quota, which is investing in our own wellness, investing in our own well-being. And we're at a very wonderful place in the history of music teaching, because we can go further than the goals that our predecessors have had. And whereas our predecessors might have been really focused on, we need to get those future musicians well equipped and ready to go, we're saying, yeah, we already know how to do that. But we're also going to make sure that this music making experience is something that anyone can take on, and they can make it belong to them, and it can be at their own level. If their chill out piece is My Neighbor Totoro, or their chill out piece is playing the accordion arrangement of Vivaldi Four Seasons, both of those are investments in ourselves and in our communities.
Right. Well said. And I think the other thing that's happening is we're also seeing how a lot of universities and even just primary schools, secondary education schools are cutting music department and cutting music funding. And so I'm curious to know your thoughts about how do we, if that's what's happening, if those are the realities that we deal with, then what do we do? How do we continue to move that needle forward for not only understanding and advocacy, but also education? Do you have
Yeah.
thoughts?
I sure do. And studio music teachers are the ones that we can do this job.
Yeah.
Class teachers are really busy. They got a million things to do and a
Yeah.
million people to be responsible to. We are embedded in the community. We are the people who are talking one-on-one with parents and our students.
Mhm.
So we are the people that can do that right there at that level. And but with that process, it means we've got to become much more skilled at the first date conversation. I'll come back to that. That's kind of
Yeah.
a little thing
Yeah.
going forward today. We've got to become really skilled. And I'll just give you an example of, a teacher's telling me recently, um, I asked her what was one of her biggest problems. She said, "Oh, parents phoning about wanting lessons just for 2 years, and if it was fun,
Mm,
continue. If it wasn't, they wouldn't." And I said, "So what is your response?" She said, "Oh, I always tell them they've got to make a longer commitment and
mm,
might not see results for a really long time." And I said, "So how's that working for you?"
yeah.
And she said, "Oh my goodness, it's not
Yeah.
working well." I said, "How long have you been doing that?" She said, "My entire career." And I went, "So here we are. How do we become the better language?" And yeah, we've
Yeah.
had language as a theme today as well.
Yeah.
So what words do we use to talk to people about? My response to the, I told her, when people phone and they say they want it for fun for 2 years, and after that, we'll see what happens, that your automatic response is, "That's fantastic."
Yeah.
And in your mind, you're going, I need to really accomplish something with this student, not in at the fourth year, but in the first lesson
Yep.
to show them. And I need to talk about things that are meaningful for this family, like maybe structured excellence and interruptive messiness, or
Yeah.
we're doing this to chill out and we're doing it for brain development as well. So we've
Hmm.
got to start having those conversations more regular because as the researchers will point out, the knowledge that parents typically have in terms of what they come in with to look at piano lessons is very narrow. If they had piano lessons as a child,
Yep.
they've got a very narrow picture of
Yeah.
what music lessons are all about. So if they're coming in from that picture, and it's not about telling them, "Oh, your picture's too small," it's about saying, I'm going to help this person get
Yeah.
a bigger picture of what the real world is all about and how music can help us to explore that."
And I would encourage people not only to do that within their studios and in the context of your studio and your own clients, but school board meeting
Mm.
or city council meeting or your local arts group or whatever groups that you can affect in your community. That's the place to start, really, for me personally, because that's where I have the voice and the influence. I may not be able to do anything for some major university. I may not be able to do anything for Juilliard, right?
Right.
Or Berkeley, but I can do something here locally from my local universities, my local elementary school, my local high school, my local middle school orchestra program. I can do something local from my arts programs here. And I think that that's where a lot of people feel like, does my voice really matter? It does. It matters big in your community. So we need to have those first date conversations, not just with our clients, but with our communities as well.
For sure. Yeah.
Wonderful. We are almost out of time, but before I let you go, do you have any other encouragement or anything that you would like to offer for listeners?
Well, I think I would just want to go back to something that I said probably midway through. And it's the whole notion of teaching as the person that we really are, instead
Mm,
of teaching like we think other people might want us to be. And and in exploring who we are, to understand that we have many layers to our personality. We have, I have the bald guy with the beard, physical appearance. I have the intuitive empath, which is in the back,
right.
helping me out all the time. And then I have the layer of, there's a spiritual layer that's going on, that I'm connected to the world spiritually. So there are all these layers that are involved in our teaching. And if we can become comfortable over time with sharing those aspects of who we are with our students and their families, oh, I think that's where we're at today, is we're
Yeah.
at this place where we can do things differently from previous generations. Previous generations had a lot of control mechanisms going on where, teachers controlled what students did and parents controlled what children did. And it's not to say that teachers and students are equal or parents and children are equal, but we've kind of come to a gentler place
Yeah.
of understanding each other, of accepting each other, and then the big thing, caring for ourselves,
Mm.
caring for each other, and caring for the world around us.
What beautiful encouragement for those who are listening and watching. Thank you so much for your time today, Merlin. Where can people find out more about you and what you do? I know we have your website down below, but what other resources or places do you want people to be able to find you?
Yeah, for sure. So the teachmusic21c.com website is the place where you'll find a ton of resources, absolutely a ton of things there. You'll find the gratitude in the shadow of a global pandemic talk there under resources. But there's also Instagram. Check me out on
Hmm.
Instagram. The biggest place that I'm spending time these days is on LinkedIn. And I'll
Okay.
post things on LinkedIn probably twice a week to just to kind of keep the ball rolling. Here's something to think about today. I think yesterday I posted about wellness or something like that. So LinkedIn is another great place. My book, More Than Music Lessons, which is available on Amazon, another just easy resource to use. And I'll encourage people to really get connected with Teach Music 21C. I'm so proud of this organization. We've got courses to help people in terms of just expanding and enhancing that teaching toolkit.
Yeah.
And then the other bonus that we have as well is we're now a community. 5 years ago, it was just me and my four friends online talking. Now we have it's still a small community, but I can honestly say it's a community, and being part of that and sharing with each other, and sharing a common language, I'll also say. So because we've worked through certain concepts together, all those things just it makes we've got a it's not like going on Facebook or that you'll hear every idea under the sun. At Teach Music 21C community, we've got our anchors and inspirations that are holding us in place. And now it's a matter of what are we going to do with it. So yeah, I'll look forward to hearing from anybody who's heard this podcast today. And I'll also encourage them to make more connections with what you're doing as well and the community that you're putting together.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Merlin. We could talk. I know you and I could talk for hours and hours. So thank you so much for the time today to share. I so appreciate the great work that you're doing. And that does it for us here today at Sounds of Encouragement. Remember, I'm always here for you, so you can be there for those who need you the most. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please click on the show notes to learn more about my guest and to listen to their top songs of encouragement. If you have found value in these podcasts, please share the podcast with those you know, leave a positive review, or support the show at buymeacoffee.com. Sounds of Encouragement is a podcast production of Music Grow LLC, part of growing musicians and teachers everywhere. Sounds of Encouragement is hosted, produced, and edited by Melissa Slocum. To get in touch, contact soundoфencouragement@gmail.com. You can also find Sounds of Encouragement on Clubhouse. Drop in weekly for a dose of personal encouragement. Theme music by Melissa Slocum and Steve Tressler. Music mixed and mastered by Steve Tressler. Thank you to Steve Tressler and Christina Lopriori, who encouraged me to do this in the first place. And remember, I'm here for you, so you can be there for those who need you the most.